we see the kind of torque he chooses to pull.
Mr. Speaker, he makes it too easy. He talks about caucus meetings and Loblaws. Get this. The Prime Minister had someone who is his Director of Caucus Services named Julie DeWolf, who is now a lobbyist for Loblaws. Not only that, he digs up a lot of dirt. His chief dirt digger, Kevin Bosch, left his office so that he could go and work as a lobbyist for Loblaws. Would he like us to continue going down the list of all of his Loblaws lobbyists, Mr. Speaker?
Speaker, I invite the Leader of the Conservative Party to repeat that allegation outside of the House. I will absolutely reject it.
First of all, I have stated all of these things outside of the House of Commons, so whatever threat he's trying to make, he can act on. But
nothing could be further from the truth.
Look, I don't want to speak for every last serving member of law enforcement, but there was a very strong consensus that we needed to invoke the act. We invoked the act because it was the advice of nonpartisan professional law enforcement. The advice that we were getting was that that law enforcement needed the Emergencies Act. It was only after we got advice from law enforcement that we invoked the Emergencies Act, and that advice came from very experienced law enforcement. We had to invoke the Emergencies Act, and we did so on the basis of nonpartisan professional advice from law enforcement, and that was the advice that we were receiving from law enforcement, and one of the main reasons why we invoked the Emergencies Act. We got the advice from our law enforcement that we got the threshold. They then came to their judgment, as you say, and thereafter we came to ours on the basis of the advice that we were getting.
You have been weighed, you have been measured, and you have been found wanting.
Fear in here is that the first step towards registering your guns is just the first step towards taking away guns from everyone. But that's never going to happen because here in Canada we have a culture that has grown up with guns and that respects the need to go out into the wilderness and shoot things from time to time.
I'm not sure the Liberals understand what the word respect means.
And so part of the pushback is what we call deception and obfuscation. They try to suggest that, no, you're going to ban shotguns, which are used for hunting, and that's not true. There's a lot of misinformation that they'll put out. And I don't care about that, to be honest with you.
I've remained focused with my team on how we're going to continue to serve Canadians, to support the middle class and people working hard to join it, to create growth in our economy that is bringing people together and allaying anxieties and fears that people may have.
Effort that the Conservatives are making to create an environment which, is toxic. It's not healthy. Well, I think what I've done here, and particularly the scale of reach that this tweet had, I spoke with the House Leader today, and we worked through the reaction to what we saw. And what emerged was a lot of people got the impression that I was directly linking the tragedy in Winnipeg to something that the Conservatives had done. Well, that's entirely inappropriate. That is not what was intended, but if it happened that way, then I've apologized for that.
Okay. And that's when the mayor pushed back, but not in your standard politician's playbook kind of a way. She took to her Twitter account, and 2 weeks ago today, pushed this out. This is the tweet from Peterborough's mayor that got everybody talking. She says, people have been asking me to comment on the events of the past weekend in Peterborough. I hate giving airtime or the spotlight to these imbeciles. Here's my comment. Fuck off, you fuckwads.
Hey, excuse me. I'm with the Western Standard, isn't it? Isn't it supposed to be a peaceful protest?
Fuck off. I hope you keep your liberal job. You're a right-wing authoritarian propaganda news source.
It's supposed to be a...
Wear a mask, bitch! Wear a mask, bitch!
A Liberal MP from Quebec has once again been caught in a compromising position during a virtual House of Commons meeting. That's right, William Amos says he didn't realize he was on camera when he took a break to go to the bathroom during a meeting on Tuesday. He issued a statement on Twitter and announced he is temporarily stepping back from parliamentary secretary duties to seek help. Amos made headlines last month after a screenshot from an internal parliamentary feed.
Quebec MP is giving up some of his parliamentary duties after a second incident involving him being caught on camera in an inappropriate position. Liberal Will Amos says while he was attending a House of Commons proceeding virtually Wednesday, he urinated without realizing he was on camera.
Today, I would like to present my apologies to the House for breaching the standing orders by taking a picture of a member on April 14th. I personally apologized to him, but I also wanted to do so publicly. To him personally, to his family, to his colleagues, and anyone I may have offended. I'd like to say, to conclude, that I have no idea how that photo made its way into the media. That is all I have to say under the circumstances. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to address the question of privilege that was raised by the member for Barrie Innsville earlier today. I want to take this opportunity to apologize sincerely and unreservedly to all members of the Parliament for the unfortunate event that transpired last Friday. And I ask that House and its members to forgive me for my lapse in judgment. I take this matter extremely seriously, and I promise never to repeat this error again. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Madam Speaker, I think that we have to be very careful in terms of the types of points of order. You know, what people are doing in their office on virtual, sometimes it can be very easy to shy away from the camera to do something else, much like we might shift over a couple of seats. The most important thing, I believe, is that the member has the camera on and that they're in the room. And I wouldn't want to attempt to embarrass members. It doesn't matter what political party they might belong to.
This Liberal NDP government promised interest rates would not go up. But after 8 miserable years of this Prime Minister, Canadians know that is not true. Mortgage defaults and forced home sales are on the rise. Lindsay is one of hundreds who wrote to me to tell me about her skyrocketing mortgage rate. She's paying an extra $1,250 a month. She doesn't have an extra $1,250 a month. This Prime Minister is just not worth the cost. So when will he stop his inflationary spending so Canadians like Lindsay can keep their home?
Mr. Speaker, last week I had the opportunity to visit Peterborough, that member's riding, where I announced $42 million for the construction or renovation of over 1,100 units of housing. You know what's interesting, Mr. Speaker? Wow. That member voted against every program that made that funding possible, Mr. Speaker, and then she tried to take credit for it. It's astounding what the Conservatives continue to do. What Canadians need is a government to be behind them, to see more construction built, to see the Canada Child Benefit continue to have an effect. Dental care, child care, they're against all of those, Mr. Speaker.
Unfortunately, the unvaccinated continue to disproportionately risk the safety of those vaccinated against COVID-19.
I just ultimately got quite frustrated, and I told him that he was a disgrace of a Canadian, and he just replied and said, "F*** off."
You seem to want to have this conversation.
No,
with
I don't,
me.
actually.
Oh,
You're wasting my time.
Because freedom is just a fucking bullshit waste of time, right?
I'm sorry, do you want to keep swearing up here at me?
I can swear.
Have I sworn at you or used disrespectful language?
No.
Have I? Then you do the same.
Sure.
Just very blunt words that he's used, but that's how we've been treated for the past 2 years.
Kate's a teacher in New Zealand who was originally born in Canada, who has been reaching out to local MPs here in Ontario to figure out the situation on when she can potentially visit her family back home here in Canada.
So I've been teaching here for 6 years, primary and intermediate school. And then obviously when COVID happened, all the borders shut, and I just haven't seen my family for 2.5 years now. So it's been a bit tricky coping with all of the challenges that have arisen. And, you know, for example, I missed my papa's funeral and had to say goodbye on FaceTime, and I had to get married without my parents here last year because they weren't allowed to travel to come and see me. So I had been calling and emailing Liberal and NDP offices frequently, and nobody was replying to me at all. Most of them weren't even in their offices. They were working from home and just not replying. So I messaged Adam on Instagram and just introduced myself and said what was happening in my life and why I was frustrated. And he just kind of brushed it off and said that I could fly into Canada and that's it. And I said, well, I can't even fly from British Columbia to Ontario to see my family. And I'm not allowed back out. So I wouldn't be able to come back to my husband here in New Zealand and to my home and everything. What is the justification for having the border shut? Because even New Zealand, which was one of the strictest countries in the world, they're letting me as an unjabbed permanent resident enter and exit. And it just didn't make sense to me that I couldn't do that with Canada, where I'm a citizen and I was born and raised there. And I just ultimately got quite frustrated, and I told him that he was a disgrace of a Canadian, and he just replied and said, "F off." And when I asked him if I had upset him, he said no, but that he regretted replying to someone like me.
Has he apologized at all to you personally? Has he reached out to you? Has there been any further contact between the two of you?
No, he didn't say sorry in the Instagram chat. He just blocked me, and then he posted something on Twitter apparently apologizing, which I got Twitter a day after all of this happened because someone sent me a link to something about the story. So he obviously didn't count on me seeing that apology, and he hasn't reached out to me personally to apologize. So I definitely don't believe it was a sincere apology that was made on Twitter or in the House of Commons.
I know for a fact that farmers are asking that minister to axe the carbon tax. That PM promised that the Senate would be independent, but the actions this past week prove that that is a complete farce. We know he bullied his senators. The PM himself was on the phone over the weekend telling them they had to gut Bill C-234. The Prime Minister lied, and his minions continue to lie about
There needs to be rules and regulations to control their behavior, and if they refuse to be law-abiding, then there are consequences for that.
Conservatives introduced a common sense motion to cancel the planned carbon tax hike that will cost them even more on gas, groceries, and home heating. Will the Liberals support our common sense Conservative motion and cancel their April 1st carbon tax hike?
Once again, we hear misleading rhetoric from the other side of the House. Folks in Canada know that 80% of Canadian families get more money back than they pay. It is an affordability measure as well as something that actually addresses the climate crisis in front of us. It is something that helps the poorest of Canadians. And in fact, what he wants to do is take away the rebate. He wants to take away from poor and modest income people money that actually help to pay for groceries, that help to pay for rent, that help to pay for transportation. Shame on you for trying to target those folks and benefit only the wealthy in Canada.
That minister can manipulate the facts all day long, but that's not going to change the painful reality that Canadians across this country are experiencing. Let's not forget that the PBO has said that Canadians will still be paying hundreds of dollars in carbon tax even after the rebate. Canadians who are already struggling to afford gas, groceries, and home heating cannot afford this NDP Liberal government's carbon tax increase.
Welcome back, Omar Khadr. You're home. Omar Khadr, you got more class than the whole fucking cabinet. Thank you.
I want to take this opportunity to speak to our brothers, the Taliban. We call on you to ensure the safe and secure passage of any individual.
Referring to the Taliban as our brothers. And Nick, I saw all sorts of defences put forward that in Farsi you say that about your enemies. I speak Farsi and I'm not familiar with calling your enemies brother, but